What's up, guys? Today we are going to be ranking all the Marvel Future Revolution characters from best to worst. So let's get into it. Alright, so today we are going to be ranking all the characters in Marvel Future Revolution from best to worst. Now, if you've seen some of my previous videos, you know that I don't particularly like this approach to reviewing the characters in this game, because I feel that the characters are more like classes, in that it's tough to compare a rogue versus a tank versus a cleric, so to speak. A lot of the characters have different functions, and so it's not particularly fair to compare them against one another. However, I have been streaming Marvel Future Revolution on Twitch quite a bit, and I get asked this question constantly. It seems that everyone wants a ranking of the characters. So while I don't love this approach, and ultimately I encourage you to play whoever you find fun, because I think all the characters are pretty well balanced, there is definitely a method for ranking the characters objectively from best to worst. And so that is what we're going to do in this video. So as for how I was able to formulate this ranking list, there's a bit of an inherent flaw with the design philosophy for Marvel Future Revolution, and that is that pretty much all of the important game modes in Marvel Future Revolution really only prioritize grading the characters by one scale, and that is their damage. And now that may seem unfair, and of course, not every character is designed to be the absolute top damage character. They are very different. Some are more support style, some are more tank style, but most of the game modes in this game look at damage either in terms of your overall damage dealt and your sustained DPS. So those are modes like Raid and Most Wanted, whereas otherwise they'll look at burst damage and your ability to score last hits, which is again very damage based, and those are game modes like Omega War and Dark Zone. So this game puts a heavy emphasis on damage. And while there are characters who have really respectable defensive and support merits, there are no game modes that reward you for damage absorbed or tankiness or dodging or buffing your teammates or providing shields. That just the closest you get is Battle Challenge and Dimensional Duel, where again in Dimensional Duel most characters can hold their own, which we'll get to. And in Battle Challenge, your survivability is pretty important for just outright finishing a stage you otherwise wouldn't be able to. But the vast majority of game modes in this game just look at your damage, either sustained or burst. So this list is going to be pretty heavily weighted towards who does good damage, and it's not the fault of the lower damage characters that they do lower damage, because they were designed for other things, but the game doesn't do a good job of actually grading them on those things and rewarding them. So that's how we ended up with this list. But anyway, enough of my explanation. Let's get into the list. All right, so what you see behind me is my ranking of all the characters from best to worst, with Black Widow up at the top and Captain America down at the bottom. I'm going to briefly explain how I came to this conclusion. So we'll start with Black Widow. And as previously mentioned, Black Widow's damage is incredible. She has almost twice as much attack as she does defense and HP. She has a really strong single target burst damage attack in her sniper shot that allows her to easily get last hits in modes like Dark Zone, which is very important for very good rewards. And she's just overall incredibly devastating in the PvP modes. Her ultimate in particular is just really good for outplay, in that it gives her the ability to go invisible. She gets extra dodges and can break line of sight and targeting. Right now, the top Dimensional Duel players and the top Omega War players are Black Widow. And because of the defensive utility provided by her ultimate, she doesn't really feel the weakness of her low defense. Meanwhile, she just absolutely excels at anything that grades you on offense, which right now is pretty much everything. So for that reason, I got to give Black Widow the top spot. Coming in at number 2, as you can see, we got Iron Man, and he's up there for a lot of the same reasons. His offense is also really high. He has decent natural defense, although he's a bit low on HP. But again, this game grades you on your ability to put out damage, and Iron Man can put out a ton of both sustained damage and burst damage. His ultimate is great for sustained damage. His spinning blades do so much in a burst attack. There's just a lot of opportunities to score really, really high with Iron Man for damage, and you don't really feel his lack of defense too much because he has a lot of evasive abilities kind of baked into his natural skills that he tends to use in a lot of the game modes. So yeah, had to give Iron Man the number 2 spot. Coming in at number 3, we got Captain Marvel, my main in particular. And I feel that in this regard, she's very similar to Iron Man in that she's definitely offense forward. She can be very flexible. She's a bit squishy, but she has certain builds, especially ones really emphasizing her light speed movement, where she can get a lot of dodges. And her ultimate packs a serious punch, and between the photon focus beam and a couple of her other abilities that do decent bursts, she can put out some really, really good sustained damage, and overall can do pretty well both in PvP and PvE. Next up, we have Doctor Strange. Now, this is where the list gets a little bit interesting because at this point in the list, it's stopped being about just raw offense, because the differences in offense between this next batch of characters we're going to talk about is not particularly significant. Actually, of the next 3, I would say Storm has the best damage, but not by too much more than the others, and I feel that she has some major drawbacks that they don't. So we'll start with talking about Doctor Strange, and I feel that Doctor Strange is easily the most well-rounded of all the characters. If you want a character that's pretty good at everything, I feel like you're looking for Doctor Strange. He has abilities that can buff teammates, he has control effects, he has pretty good sustained damage. All his stats are pretty even across the board. He's just really, really well balanced. He is a jack of all trades, master of none, so he doesn't rank incredibly highly in that when you need him to, he can't put out a ton of damage, but he doesn't really have any weaknesses, so that's why you give Doctor Strange the number 4 spot. Coming in at number 5, we got Spider-Man, and Spider-Man is a bit of an interesting one. His damage is pretty comparable to Doctor Strange. It might be even a little bit higher. However, he has a lot of defensive emphasis in particular. He has a lot of dodge, and you can build him in certain ways where he can be very, very hard to hit. So I don't find his damage to be quite comparable to some of the upper echelon picks like Black Widow, like Iron Man, like Captain Marvel. But all in all, Spider-Man does a pretty good job of putting out damage, and he has a lot of defensive perks. He just doesn't really get rewarded often for those defensive perks. So that's why I have him down here. That, and he doesn't really get too much use out of his control builds. Next up, we have Storm, and Storm is an interesting one because Storm's damage is incredible. Storm is an all-star in game modes like Raid and in Special Operations. However, the major drawbacks for Storm are that she is really clunky to use, and she's, I don't want to say unusable in PvP, but she really struggles in PvP. She's very predictable. She doesn't have a lot of quick activating abilities. She's just easy to play around. So while she can in the PvE game modes put out a ton of damage, she's just really easy to overtake in Dimensional Duel and in Omega War. And so for that reason, I had to put her a bit lower on this list. So got her at number 6. Coming in at number 7, we have Star-Lord. And Star-Lord's a bit of an interesting one because he is a really, really good support style character. He has an amazing set of positive effects he can grant to his teammates. He's really fun to use. He has really reactive controls and abilities, and he also has really, really good control effects, particularly debuffs and mainly dots. But the big thing about Star-Lord is that his DPS is incredible. It just takes a while to spin up. So for game modes like Raid and for doing most wanted targets, Star-Lord is very, very good, similar to Storm. However, Star-Lord needs time to work, and he definitely doesn't have that much burst. It is tricky for him to get last hits, and because he has so many abilities that are balanced to help his team, unfortunately, as we've mentioned, there is no game mode that rewards him for buffing his allies, and so because his stats and a couple of his other metrics suffer as a result of how much of a team player he is, he's lower on the list because he doesn't get rewarded for being a team player. And finally, that brings us to Captain America. And Captain America, as you can guess, is at the bottom of this list for all of the reasons we've already outlined. He is an incredible tank. He is a really, really good support style tank for his team. He provides really good shields, but his damage output is really low. And there is no game mode where you get rewarded for being really, really tanky There is no game mode that rewards you for holding aggro or for maintaining aggro and absorbing damage or distributing shields. The game mainly just looks at damage, and his damage is just considerably lower than the other characters. And while it is possible to spec into Captain America to make him do decent damage, if you spec really heavily into the damage for any character, they will also do good damage and be able to overtake Captain America. So unfortunately, despite the fact that I really like Captain America's playstyle, the game does not reward him for being good at what they made him good at. So I have to give him the number 8 spot. All right, so those are my thoughts on all the characters in Marvel Future Revolution as it stands, but I'm curious, I want to hear you guys' thoughts. Do you think that someone deserves more attention, that I'm really overlooking a certain benefit that a character has? Do you think I got something majorly wrong? Please let me know if there's anything in particular you strongly agree with or strongly disagree with in the comments below. Otherwise, though, thank you guys very much for checking out this video. Please be sure to satisfy the algorithm gods with that like, that comment, that subscribe. But otherwise, again, thanks for checking this out, and I will see you guys real soon. Until next time. Peace!